INH. Have you ever stood in the middle of a glittering ballroom, wearing the cheapest dress in the room, and listened to your own father announce in front of hundreds of people that the only child worthy of inheriting the family wasn't you? I have. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 28 years old. For nearly 20 years, in my own family, I wasn't the rebellious child or the obvious failure. I was something worse than that. The child people quietly treated like a technical error. My parents, Victor Carter and Elaine Carter, never called me useless to my face. Instead, they used phrases so polite they felt colder than insults. Emma is a little slower than others. Emma isn't suited for competitive environments. Emma is kind, but she doesn't have a strategic mind. And the one that hurt the most? She's just not like the rest of the family. The Carters of Ashford Heights were the kind of wealthy family that didn't need to be loud about it. Our name appeared on hospital donor boards, scholarship foundations, and charity galas at the Grand Marlowe Hotel. My father ran the hotel and resort empire that my grandmother, Jasmine Carter, had built from nothing, starting with a small roadside inn in Maple Grove. But when that empire passed into my father's hands, something else was passed along with it. Not vision, not resilience, but a deep worship of the appearance of success. In our house, a person's value was measured by the schools they attended, the way they spoke in public, and whether they impressed the right people. My sister, Hannah Carter, was the perfect embodiment of everything my parents admired. Beautiful, brilliant, polished, always at the center of every photograph. I, on the other hand, had been diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 7. I read slowly. It took me longer to process a paragraph, a contract, a page of text, but the worst part wasn't that I read slowly. The worst part was that my family treated it as proof that I was simply less capable. When Hannah was 12, she had a private violin teacher, French lessons, and an SAT tutor. When I asked for extra help with reading, my mother only sighed. "We've tried everything, Emma. Some children just aren't academic." I was 12, and I believed her. There was only one person who never looked at me like I was a burden. My grandmother, Jasmine. Every Sunday afternoon, I would take the train to her apartment near Brook Hollow. She never forced me to read aloud line by line. Instead, she told stories. She pulled out old contracts, old maps, photographs of construction sites, and taught me to see things as systems. Once she placed her hand over mine and said, "Emma, you read slower than others, but you see connections they miss. That's not a weakness. That's a different kind of vision." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. I only knew that when I was with her, I didn't feel like the extra piece in someone else's puzzle. Then came the night at the Grand Marlowe Hotel. It was the event my father organized to announce Hannah's new position in the company. A true coronation. 350 guests, investors, attorneys, business partners, crystal chandeliers blazing overhead. I arrived 7 minutes late because the subway had stalled. Right outside the entrance, my mother stopped me. Her eyes traveled from my worn shoes to my simple black dress. "Couldn't you find something that looked better? This is what I have." She adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "Tonight is about Hannah. Don't draw attention to yourself. Your table is at the back, near the service door. Table 27, half hidden behind a large pillar." My father stepped onto the stage at 8:30, raised a glass, and smiled like a man accustomed to being heard. He spoke about Hannah's achievements, her degrees, her future. "From this moment forward, Hannah Carter will be the official heir to the majority of my personal assets, the strategic direction of the company, and the leadership of Carter Hospitality when I retire." The room erupted into applause. Then he glanced toward the back of the room, toward the place where I was sitting, and added with a half-joking smile, "And Emma? Well, Emma is here tonight too." A few people laughed. I heard them clearly. I also heard Hannah laugh. Not loudly, not cruelly, but enough. In that moment, I noticed a gray-haired man standing near the entrance. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He wasn't eating or drinking. He was simply standing there, as if he had been waiting for exactly this moment. When the applause faded, he walked toward my table. "Miss Emma Carter?" "Yes? My name is Jonathan Bennett. I was your
Sun is
grandmother,
going
Jasmine
down.
Carter's personal attorney." My heart skipped. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick cream envelope sealed with red wax. She asked me to deliver this to you, with very specific instructions about the timing. What is it? He looked straight into my eyes. The real will. The one your father doesn't know exists. And in that moment, I understood something. Tonight was not the night I was erased from the Carter family. It was the night every lie about me began to collapse. That night, I barely slept. The small room I rented in Queens was so cramped that if I stretched my arms wide enough, I could almost touch the edge of the dresser and the bed frame at the same time. My two roommates had long since fallen asleep. Outside the window, the streetlights cast pale orange streaks across the walls. I sat cross-legged on my bed, the mahogany box placed in front of me, and for the first time in 3 years, I opened it. Inside were three things: a handwritten letter from my grandmother, Jasmine, a founding partnership document from 1965, and a thin black USB drive, far more modern than the other two items. I opened the letter first. My dear Emma, if you are reading this, it means Jonathan has done his part, and your father has done exactly what I feared most. He has shown you publicly that he never truly saw your worth. I had to stop for a moment, not because the words were difficult to read, but because my throat had tightened. I kept reading. She explained that the old document was the original founding agreement from when she established Carter Hospitality with her first two partners. According to that agreement, the founders' shares carried permanent voting rights and could not be diluted without a special vote of the board. In other words, her shares were not just money. They were the backbone of the company's power. Then I reached the section about the USB. In 2018, Victor proposed a resolution to reduce my voting power from 51% to 10%, claiming I was too old to understand modern business. That was not the truth. It was simply a polite way to take control away from me. My hands tightened around the letter. My father had tried to steal power from his own mother, and in that moment, I understood why she had chosen me. Not because I was pitiful, but because she knew exactly what kind of man Victor Carter was. I plugged the USB into my old laptop. Inside were a scanned PDF of board meeting minutes, an audio recording, and several internal emails. I opened the recording first. My father's voice filled the dark room. Deep, confident, cold. My mother can no longer keep up with the pace of development today. For the long-term interests of the company, I propose adjusting her voting power to a symbolic level. I stopped the recording, not because I couldn't bear to hear it, but because I had already heard enough. Jasmine had not only left me shares, she had left me evidence. She knew there would come a day when Victor would push me to the edge, and when that day arrived, I would need more than an emotional last wish. I would need the truth solid enough to place in the middle of a boardroom table. The next morning, at 9:15, I called Jonathan Bennett. He answered on the second ring. "I've read everything," I said. "Then you understand what needs to happen. I need an emergency board meeting." "That's correct. But you'll need at least 3 board members to sign the request." "I don't have anyone." He paused for a moment before replying. "Yes, you do. Jasmine didn't prepare this for you alone." He gave me the number of Evelyn Moore, who had worked with my grandmother for more than 30 years and was still a powerful member of the board. I called. She answered quickly, her voice rough and direct. "Emma Carter?" "Yes. It's Emma. I knew you would call. Jasmine told me 3 years ago." I closed my eyes. Even this my grandmother had seen coming. I briefly explained the night at the Grand Marlowe, the will, and the 72-hour condition. Evelyn listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she simply said, "If you want justice, I'll sign. But are you ready for what Victor is about to throw at you?" I stared at the wall in front of me. They've been throwing things at me my whole life. This time, at least I get to respond. Evelyn gave a quiet laugh. "You really are Jasmine's granddaughter." That same day, Jonathan and Evelyn helped me reach 2 more board members. One was Adrian Cole, the company's former strategy director. The other was Jonathan Carter Bennett, an independent board member and a longtime friend of my grandmother. Both agreed to sign. By evening, the emergency meeting request was complete. The meeting was scheduled for the morning of May 18th on the 42nd floor of Carter Tower. I hadn't even had time to breathe when, the next afternoon, my father found out. I knew because Hannah called me at exactly 4:47. Her voice was sharp as glass. "Emma, what did you do?" I was sitting at my tiny desk in the administrative department, pretending to organize files like any other day. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. There's an emergency board meeting request. Your name is on it. I stayed silent. She lowered her voice, every word tight as a wire. If you're trying to humiliate the family in front of the board, listen carefully. You're not strong enough for that. I glanced through the frosted glass toward my father's corner office. I've always been told I'm not enough for anything, because that's the truth. This time her words didn't freeze me the way they once had. Maybe because, for the first time, I understood that Hannah didn't have the power to define me. She was simply afraid of losing what she had been promised. I answered slowly. Just come to the meeting tomorrow. Then you'll see. She hung up. 20 minutes later, my father walked past my desk without even looking at me, slamming his office door so hard the glass shook. Through the thin wall, I heard him speaking on the phone. This is nonsense. A performance. Emma can't even read a proper financial report. She's not a threat. I sat still. For the first time in my life, being underestimated had become my greatest advantage. The night before the meeting, I prepared everything. 3 printed copies of the will, a certified copy of the founding agreement, the 2018 recording, email confirmations from the attorney, and a short statement, no self-pity, no long accusations, just the truth, arranged carefully enough that no one could dismiss it as the emotions of a wounded daughter. Around 1 in the morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. Pale face, dark circles under my eyes. The gray blazer I borrowed from my roommate hung slightly loose on my shoulders. I did not look like someone about to walk into a battle for corporate power. But then I remembered something Jasmine once told me. The most dangerous person in the room isn't always the best dressed. Sometimes it's the one who has been silent for far too long. The next morning, the elevator opened on the 42nd floor. The hallway smelled of marble, leather, strong coffee, and power. A security guard stopped me outside the boardroom. Name? Emma Carter. He frowned at his tablet. You're not on the approved guest list. I have business with the board. Sorry. This is a restricted meeting. That's right, a woman's voice said behind me. And Emma doesn't belong here. I turned. Hannah stood there in a perfect navy suit, her hair neatly tied back, a silk scarf around her neck. She looked at me the way someone looks at a minor inconvenience on an important night. What are you doing here? I'm attending the meeting. She let out a cold laugh. You? You don't even know half the basic abbreviations in an executive report. Return on investment is ROI. Her smile faltered. At that moment, my father appeared at the end of the hallway. What's going on? Hannah says I'm not allowed in. That's correct, my father said immediately. Go back to your desk. This has nothing to do with you. Actually, it does. Evelyn Moore's voice came from the boardroom door. She stepped out. Silver hair, straight back, eyes sharp enough to silence the entire hallway. I invited Emma. She has the right to present before the board. My father's jaw tightened, but he still stepped aside. Fine, let her in. I'd like to see just how badly she embarrasses herself. I stepped across the threshold. A polished walnut oval table, 12 leather chairs, portraits of past leaders lining the walls. Among them hung Jasmine Carter's portrait, looking down at the room with calm eyes as if she had always known this day would come. I was directed to a seat at the end of the table. Jonathan Bennett sat in the corner with a folder. Evelyn sat near the center. My father was at the head of the table, Hannah beside him, like a future queen still certain the throne belonged to her. The chairman opened the meeting briefly, then turned to Evelyn. She stood. The matter before us concerns a document recently brought to light that directly affects the ownership structure of this company. Then she looked at me. I yield the floor to Emma Carter. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I stood up. Thank you for allowing me to speak. What I am about to present may surprise some of you. I only ask one thing, please hear all the evidence before drawing conclusions. My father immediately rose. Before we waste any more of the board's valuable time, I think some context is necessary. Emma is my daughter. I love her, but she has no expertise in governance, legal matters, or finance. She works in the administrative department. Hannah added sweetly. Emma has struggled with reading since childhood. Our family tried to help, but some limits can't simply be overcome. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. My father concluded, what you're seeing here is simply an emotional reaction after the ceremony the other night. I looked at him, then at Hannah, and suddenly everything became painfully clear. They weren't confused. They were just replaying the same roles as always. The reasonable father, the perfect daughter, the unstable younger sister. The only difference this time was that I hadn't walked into the room empty-handed. The chairman cut my father off. "Mr. Carter, it is now Miss Emma's time." I nodded and opened my folder. "I won't discuss my reading ability today," I said. "I will discuss this." I held up Jasmine Carter's will. The room went silent, as if the air itself had been pulled away. I placed it on the table, looked directly at my father, and said, "This is the final will of Jasmine Carter, legally notarized on September 12th, 2019. My father's face changed color instantly. And I knew. My grandmother's earthquake had just begun. I never forgot the look on my father's face in that moment. It was not immediate anger. It was not contempt, either. It was a very brief flash of real terror, as if a door he had believed was locked forever had suddenly burst open right in front of him. "That's impossible," he said, his voice tightening. "My mother's will was executed in 2015. I have a copy." "I'm sure you do," I replied. "But under the law, a later valid will automatically revokes the earlier one. And this one was executed 4 years later." I slid the document toward the chairman of the board. "Attorney Jonathan Bennett is here to authenticate it." Jonathan rose from the corner of the room, calm and concise. "My name is Jonathan Bennett, senior partner at Bennett & Cole. I served as Jasmine Carter's personal attorney from 2008 until her passing. I can confirm that this document was properly executed in my presence and in the presence of 2 independent witnesses. The original has been held in secure custody in accordance with legal procedure." The chairman skimmed the middle section, then looked up. "This will transfers 51% of Carter Hospitality to Emma Carter?" "That is correct," Jonathan said. Whispers spread immediately around the boardroom table. Hannah leaned forward. "It's a forgery." But her voice no longer carried the confidence it had only minutes earlier. Jonathan turned to her, polite in a way that felt almost icy. "I would advise you not to make accusations of fraud without evidence." My father slammed his hand down on the table. "This is absurd. My mother was not in stable health at the time. She was influenced." "Influenced?" I pulled out my phone. "Then how do you explain this?" I pressed play on the 2018 recording. My father's voice filled the room. "My mother is no longer fit to retain controlling voting authority." I stopped the audio halfway through. That much was enough. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. My father's face turned red. "That was an internal discussion. Jasmine Carter was present," I said, "and she had every right to record it when others were trying to strip away her power." I looked directly at the chairman. "Please allow me to read the relevant section of the will." He nodded. I opened to the middle page, held the paper with both hands, and read slowly, clearly, every word deliberate. "I leave to my granddaughter, Emma Carter, 51% of the shares of Carter Hospitality Group, along with all associated voting rights." I paused. The room seemed frozen. Then I continued. "This decision is made with full awareness of the way Victor Carter has treated Emma. She has been pushed aside, diminished, and denied opportunity, not because she lacks ability, but because she was denied support. Emma is not slow. Emma was neglected." Hannah made a strangled sound in her throat. My father said nothing. He only stared at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw his hands shake. I read the rest. "Victor has confused credentials with worth, achievement with character. He once tried to strip me of my authority because I saw through him. He dismisses Emma because she reminds him of a kind of strength he does not understand." I looked up. My eyes met my father's. In the past, whenever he looked at me like that, I always lowered my gaze. This time, I did not. Because for the first time in my life, what stood behind me was no longer the fear of being unloved. It was the truth. The chairman removed his glasses and set them on the table. "Jonathan, as a matter of law, does this document carry full effect?" "It does. And that means," Jonathan answered clearly, "from the moment this will was validly activated, Emma Carter became the controlling shareholder of Carter Hospitality Group." The room reacted like a lake disturbed by a stone. Hannah immediately tried to regain control. "Even if this document is valid, Emma has no experience running a corporation. She cannot lead this company." "I didn't come here to take the CEO's chair," I said. I came here to ask the board to look at the truth. I presented the minutes from the 2018 board meeting, showing that my father had tried to reduce Jasmine Carter's voting rights from 51% to 10%. Evelyn Moore spoke up at once. I was in that room. Nothing has been taken out of context. I continued. That proves something very simple. In 2019, when my grandmother executed her new will, she was completely of sound mind. This was not an emotional act. It was the preparation of a woman who saw the danger clearly and chose to stop it. The chairman looked around the table. Does anyone have evidence that contradicts what has been presented? No one spoke. After 45 minutes of legal review, the board returned with its final conclusion. The will presented by Miss Emma Carter is valid. It supersedes all prior testamentary documents. Effective immediately, Emma Carter holds 51% of Carter Hospitality Group. Then he looked up at me. As controlling shareholder, you have the right to bring a motion before the board. Miss Carter, do you have one? My heart pounded. Everyone expected me to remove my father at once. But Jasmine had not taught me to use power for revenge. I stood. I do have a motion. My father sprang up immediately. Robert, this... Sit down, Victor. He sat back down. His face had gone gray. I looked around the table. I am not proposing Victor Carter's immediate removal. I am proposing a vote of confidence. If the board still has confidence in his leadership, I will not interfere with operations at this time. If not, he must resign under the bylaws. Hannah shot to her feet. This is retaliation disguised as process. No, I said, looking directly at her. This is corporate governance. Evelyn was the first to second the motion. The vote took place in suffocating silence. 4 votes of confidence. 7 votes of no confidence. 1 abstention. The chairman set down his pen. The motion carries. Under the bylaws, Mr. Victor Carter has 30 days to submit his resignation. My father said nothing. He rose to his feet and looked at me for a long time. For the first time in my life, there was no contempt in his eyes. Only recognition. The recognition that his own arrogance had led him to this moment. Then he turned and walked away. The door closed behind him, dry and sharp as the sound of a bone breaking. And I knew, for the first time in my life, I was no longer the shadow at the far end of the Carter family table. When the meeting ended, I stepped out into the hallway, my legs still slightly numb. Not from weakness, but because my body was finally beginning to process the adrenaline it had carried for hours. My father stopped me near the private elevator. My mother stood beside him. Her face was pale, like someone who hadn't slept for several nights. You just destroyed this family, my father said. His voice was low and tight. There was no stage anymore. No board members, no polished dignity he usually wore. Just a man who had just lost something he thought he would hold on to for the rest of his life. I looked at him. No, I just told the truth. The truth? He scoffed. My mother was manipulated. She would never hand the entire company to you. Why not? I asked. Because I'm not the kind of person you wanted me to be? Because I don't speak as smoothly as Hannah? Or because you needed me to stay small so the story of your perfection wouldn't be exposed as a lie? He stepped closer. My mother put a hand on his arm. Victor, don't. He brushed her hand away. You think holding a few papers means you've won? This isn't over. This isn't over. I know it's not over, I said. But you know you'll lose if you sue. Grandma prepared for every possibility. My mother stepped forward. Emma, listen to me. I turned toward her, and for the first time, I allowed myself to truly look at the woman who gave birth to me. The woman who used to brush my hair when I was little, who sewed costumes for my school performances, who held my sister tightly after every award ceremony, and who had also remained silent at every dinner when my father made me feel smaller in front of others. We only wanted to protect you, she said, her voice breaking. I almost laughed from the pain of it. Protect me from what? From opportunity? From believing in myself? From being allowed to exist like a normal person in my own family? She began to cry. But strangely, her tears no longer shook me the way they once had. Maybe because I finally understood something. Adults can cry when they lose control. Not only when they feel regret. We thought if we didn't put expectations on you, you wouldn't feel pressure, she said. No, I replied. You did that so you wouldn't have to see that you failed to love me the right way. She froze. My father grabbed my wrist again. This time I pulled away immediately. Just one quick movement, but enough for me to feel deeply that some ties had snapped and would never return the way they once were. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed in front of my father's rigid face and my mother's tearful eyes. Inside the stainless steel space, I leaned against the wall, breathed, and then suddenly felt tears running down my face. Not tears of victory, but the tears of someone who had just buried the last hope that one day her parents might simply become different people. Sometimes the deepest pain is not being hurt. It's accepting that the people who hurt you will never change in the way you once hoped. The next day, I received an email from the chairman of the board. My father had submitted his resignation, effective in 30 days. The board appointed an interim acting CEO. At the same time, they invited me to take on the role of strategic advisor to the board during the transition period. I read the email 3 times, old habit, then forwarded it to Jonathan Bennett for review. He replied within an hour. A fair proposal, no trap clauses, Jasmine would be proud. That afternoon, an internal email went out to the entire corporation. My name appeared there, not as the girl from the administrative office, not as the disappointing daughter of the CEO, but as the controlling shareholder and strategic advisor. My phone started vibrating constantly. People who previously couldn't even remember which floor I worked on suddenly wanted coffee, wanted to catch up, wanted to talk. I ignored most of them. Some recognition arrives far too late and far too opportunistically to have any real value. But there was one message I kept, from an older executive assistant who had worked with my grandmother since the 1980s. Jasmine used to say, "You see what others miss." Today, I finally understand how right she was. A week later, the story began leaking outside. A local business magazine reported a shift in control at Carter Hospitality. My name wasn't fully mentioned due to legal restrictions, but within the industry, everyone could guess. Several partners requested meetings with me. 3 of them admitted they had long been concerned about my father's leadership but had never found a breaking point. Jasmine built something very special, one of them told me during a meeting at Brook Hollow. The aftershocks in society were real as well. Invitations to galas and events for my parents began to thin out. Some relationships around them suddenly became busy. The Carter name still carried weight, but it was no longer perfect. It had a crack, and the light passing through that crack showed just how much had been rotting inside for years. 3 weeks after the meeting, my mother called. Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "Emma, can we meet?" Just the 2 of us. I agreed to meet at a neutral cafe in Midtown. Not her house, not my office, not anywhere filled with old memories. My mother was already sitting when I arrived. She looked visibly older. Not because 3 weeks was enough to age someone so quickly, but because sometimes an internal collapse can change a person's face overnight. "Thank you for coming," she said. I sat down. "What is it?" "I want to apologize." The words came so late they were almost meaningless. But I still let her speak. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you. For the things I said. For the times I said nothing." I looked at the untouched coffee in front of her. "Because you truly regret it? Or because things are different now?" She shrank back as if splashed with cold water. Silence stretched between us. Then she said quietly, "Both." I respected that answer more than any perfect apology. At least for the first time, she wasn't trying to wrap the truth in pretty paper. "I'm ashamed to admit that," she said, her eyes reddening. "I was too busy protecting the image of our family, too busy investing in Hannah's success, that I told myself a story that I was doing it to spare you pressure. But no, I was just avoiding guilt." I let her finish. Then I said, "You let Dad call me useless in front of relatives, in front of business partners, even in front of strangers. You never defended me once." She nodded as tears fell. "I know." I took a deep breath. "I can't pretend the last 20 years didn't happen. But if you want to start again with honesty instead of pretending to be the perfect mother, I can consider it." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door slightly open enough for 2 people to stop pretending. 2 months later, Hannah called. I almost let the phone ring out. But eventually I answered. "Emma, can we meet?" We met in a park near a fountain. Hannah looked nothing like the glowing photos of her online. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair tied hastily. The armor of the golden child. Gone. "I started therapy," she said immediately. "After that day." I listened quietly. Turns out being the perfect child is also a cage, she said with a dry laugh. Dad expected excellence from me in everything. Every achievement just became the starting line for the next pressure. I still didn't interrupt. Then she continued more slowly. I saw how they treated you. I just pretended it was normal, because if I defended you, I might become the next target. You didn't protect me. I know. This time, there was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Not competition, but shame. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know. I finally see you. Those words hurt in a strange way, because they were what I had wanted to hear for so long. And because when they finally arrived, they couldn't give back the years that were gone. I don't want things to go back to the way they were, I said. I don't deserve that anyway, but I don't want to live as your enemy forever. Maybe we start from the beginning, not as perfect sisters in a family photo, just as two adults trying to learn how to be honest. Hannah nodded, eyes wet. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, just the first step. And sometimes adulthood means accepting relationships that aren't as beautiful as in movies, but are still more valuable than the masks we once wore. By November, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights. Not a penthouse, not a mansion, just a quiet place with enough sunlight and fresh air, overlooking the bridge my grandmother Jasmine once crossed during the early days of building her career. I accepted the role of Director of Sustainable Development at Carter Hospitality. It was a new department I had proposed to myself, focused on green construction, environmental impact, and restoring older hotels in ways that were kinder to people in the city. My salary was good. The dividends from my shares were even better. But the thing that made me feel richest wasn't money. It was the feeling that, for the first time, I was living a life I had chosen. My father still calls sometimes. Short conversations. Weather. Work. Health. We both understand there's a territory in the past neither of us can enter yet. Maybe one day we will. Maybe we won't. But for the first time, that no longer defines my life. My mother is learning to meet me as a real person instead of a social problem she needs me. Hannah and I drink coffee together some evenings. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we sit in silence. But it's a silence that no one echoes unhindered. On the wall of my living room hangs a portrait of Jasmine. In the afternoons, when sunlight cuts through the window and touches the frame, sometimes I almost feel like she's smiling. I often stand there looking at the painting and think, she didn't leave me a miracle. She left me tools, truth, and a door. The rest was up to me to walk through. Looking back, I understand something my 27-year-old self wasn't mature enough to understand. Grandma didn't leave me 51% of the company because I was better than Hannah. She left it to me because she believed I wouldn't let power turn me cruel the way it did my father. Dyslexia was never my flaw. It was part of me. Just like my visual memory, my patience, my ability to see patterns, my ability to recognize structure beneath polished words. The very things my parents thought made me slow were actually the things that helped me see the truth when everyone else was distracted by the surface. My father measured human worth through degrees, titles, and performance. Jasmine measured it through character, through how people treat the vulnerable, through what they do when no one is watching. And now, finally, I can measure my own worth. Not through my father's eyes, not through my mother's approval, not through my sister's achievements, not through the gaze of rooms filled with crystal chandeliers and wealthy people, but through my own standards. If you've listened this far, and you see a part of yourself in this story, a part of the child who once stood at the edge of the family table, who was told they were not enough, not as good, don't embarrass us, then I want to tell you one thing. You don't need a $47 million check to prove your worth. But you do need to give yourself permission to stop begging for recognition from people who never intended to give it. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are doors. They give you the right to decide who enters your life, under what conditions, and with what respect. My family spent years hurting me, but I didn't need to hurt them back to find peace. I only needed to stop waiting for them to see me and start seeing myself. That is the real legacy Jasmine left behind, and no one will ever take it from me again.